Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Purani Jaya Jaya Maya Purasati, Purani Jaya Jaya Maya Purasati,
Jaya Purani Jaya Maya Purasati, Purani Jaya Maya Purasati.
Jaya Krishna Krishna, Jaya Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Jaya Krishna Krishna.
Jaya Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Jaya Krishna Krishna. Jaya Giri Jaya, Giri Jaya, Giri Jaya, Jaya Giri Jaya.
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada,
Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jagannath Priya.
Jaya Vishnu Bhagavatam Class, Jaya Shri Srimad Divine Grace,
Jaya.
His compound Shri Prabhupada, Jaya Om Vishnu Bhagavatam Class, Jaya Victoria, Aswati Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Siddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada Ki, Jaya, Namaskar Krishna Ki, Jaya, Amacharya Shri Hari Jaya, Namaskar Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasadi Gaura, Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal, Shyam Kundra, Shri Vrindavan Janki, Jai Shri Mayapur Janki, Jai Shri Jagannath Priya Janki, Jai Nandamai Ki, Jai Nandamai Ki, Jai Bhakti Devi Ki, Jai Tulasi Devi Ki, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Jai Samveta Bhakti Ki, Jai Jai Guru Govinda. All praise to Sankirtan, all praise to Sankirtan, all praise to Sankirtan, all praise to Shri Guru, Shri Guru, Shri Guru.
Then to speak to our spiritual master, and the only way we are to communicate with the devotional service, and bow down to his lotus feet to pray to all occurrence. By his grace, all procrastination, zero suffering, and obtain mercy, Krishna. When I wish to have my consciousness purified, and alternating to his love, attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection of your soul's talents. He opens my heart and eyes and fills my heart with chastisement and knowledge. He is my Lord, the birth and the birth. Abundant ecstatic grace, smiling innocence to the Lord. The Vedic scriptures and immortality. Our spiritual masters, the ocean mercy. Very born by the masters and the things. No master with us to know us. Which scared the lotus feet. Your famous friend have three roles. Which I shall teach you what to see. His Divine Grace A.C. Accident to Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Until Shri Shri Prabhupada, my procession, please make us well of your mercy, so that Swami Shri may flourish in the rivers of happiness and the blessings that she has to give, and especially that for you who would live to Shri Shri Prabhupada, my procession, Ki Sharon. Praise the Lord. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Gita, Chapter 7. Prabhupada would take breakfast of fruits and nuts. Around 11 a.m. he would sit on the veranda in his gum shop while his servant massaged him with mustard oil. During the massage, Prabhupada would often speak with one or two of his Bombay devotees, giving them pertinent instructions. After lunch, he would rest an hour or two, and on arising, take a glass of fresh coconut water or sugarcane juice. In the evening, he would meet guests, and then around 10 p.m. take rest. At 1 a.m., he would rise and sit at his desk beneath a tent-like covering of mosquito netting, and dictate his translations and purpose to Chaitanya Charitamrita until time for his morning walk. Several times a day, Prabhupada would call for Giriraj and other Bombay managers to confer on the latest strategy in securing permission to build the temple. When Prabhupada's Bombay friends would sit, they would often find him on the roof of the tenement, sitting on white cotton sheeting and leaning on white bolsters, preaching the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita by the hour. He would ask his visitors to help him solidly establish Krishna consciousness in Bombay. One day during the massage, Prabhupada confided to his servant, "Most men are retired at my age. I do not want to manage anymore. I just want to do some writing." Prabhupada asked if there was some place in the world he could go for 6 months, a place where he could be all alone, where no one would come to disturb him, and where he would not get any meals. Prabhupada's servant suggested Tehran. Prabhupada considered it, then suggested moving down. He spoke of Mahatma Gandhi. He could not even sleep at night because people were always after him, even though he travelled incognito. That very day, a letter came from Bhagavan in Paris, inviting Prabhupada to his ISKCON centres in Europe. Immediately, Prabhupada was enlivened with his invitation. He said he would go. But earlier today, his servant said, he wanted to go away and be alone. Prabhupada laughed. That will not be possible for me in this lifetime. Better I keep travelling and die on the battlefield. For a warrior, it is glorious to die on the battlefield, is it not? Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 1, Text 22. Manu Api Parinaivam Patisangita Manoratha Surarsi Manurapi Parinevam Pratishandita Manoratha Surarshi Puranumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya Swayam Hati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Upadarama Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Upadarama Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya Swayam Ati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Upadarama Didn't want to try.
Api Paranaivam Pratishanditam Manoratayam Shurashi
Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi
Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya Swayam Ati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Upararama
Ati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Upararama
Manurapi Parinaivam Pratishandita Manurata Surashi
Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi
Ranumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya
Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya
Astapya Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalasaya Saya Uparama
Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya
Manurapi Paranamaya Pati Satita Manoratha Surashi
Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi
Varunamatanatamajam Akila Adhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapati
Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya
Swayam Ati Visham Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Uparama
Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Uparama
Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi
Manurapi Paranaivam Pratishandita Manoratha Surashi
Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya
Varanumatenatmajam Akila Dhara Mandala Stiti Guptaya Astapya
Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Uparama
Swayamati Vishama Vishaya Visha Jalashaya Shaya Uparama Manu,
Manu,
Swayambhuv Manu,
Swayambhuv Manu,
Api, also, Parina, by Lord Brahma, Evam, thus, Patisamhita, executed. Manartha, as mental aspiration. Surarishivara, of the great sage Narad. Anumatena, by the permission. Atmajan, his son. Akila, the entire universe. Dharamandala, of planets. Sthiti, maintenance. Guptai, for the protection. Astambhya, establishing. Swayam, personally. Ati Vishama, very dangerous. Vishaya, material affairs. Visha, of poison. Jala Ashraya, ocean. Ashaya, from desires. Upadarana, God's relief. Translation. Swayambhuv Manu, with the assistance of Lord Brahma, thus fulfilled his desires. With the permission of the great sage Narada, he delivered to his son the governmental responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. He thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. Please repeat. Swayambhuv Manu, with the assistance of Lord Brahma, thus fulfilled his desires. With the permission of the great sage Narad, he delivered to his son the governmental responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. He thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. Partly by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Swayambhuv Manu was practically hopeless because such a great personality as Narada was instructing his son Priyavrata not to accept household life. Now he was very pleased that Lord Brahma had interfered by inducing his son to accept the responsibility for ruling the government of the universe. From Bhagavad Gita we get information that Vaivasvata Manu was the son of the sun god, and that his son Maharaj Ikshvambu ruled this planet Earth. Swayambhuv Manu, however, appears to have been in charge of the entire universe, and he entrusted to his son Maharaj Priyavrata the responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planetary systems. Dharamandala means planet. This earth, for instance, is called Dharamandala. Akila, however, means all or universal. It is therefore difficult to understand where Maharaj Priyavrata was situated, but from this literature, his position certainly appears greater than that by Vaivasvata Manu, but he was entrusted with all the planetary systems of the entire universe. Another significant statement is that Swayambhuv Manu took great satisfaction from abnegating the responsibility for ruling all the planetary systems of the universe. At present, politicians are very eager to take charge of the government, and they engage their men in canvassing from door to door to get votes to win the post of their president or a similar exalted office. On the contrary, however, herein we find that King Priyavrata had to be persuaded by Lord Brahma to accept the post of emperor of the entire universe. Similarly, his father Swayambhuv Manu felt relieved to entrust the universal government to Priyavrata. Thus it is evident that the kings and executive heads of government in the Vedic age never accepted their positions for sense enjoyment. Such exalted kings, who were known as Rajarishis, ruled only to maintain and protect the kingdom for the welfare of the citizens. The history of Priyavrata and Swayambhuv Manu describes how exemplary, responsible monarchs performed the duties of government with disinterest, keeping themselves always aloof from the contamination of material attachment. Material affairs have even been compared to an ocean of poison. They have been described in a similar way to show Vaishya Nartan Das taught in one of his songs. Samshara Vishanali, Diva Nisha Hiyajwali, Judayati Na Kaina Upaya. My heart is always burning in the fire of material existence, and I have made no provisions for getting out of it. Goloketa Premadan Harinam Sankirtan, Rati Na Janvili Kenitai. The only remedy is Harinam Sankirtan, chanting the Hare Krishna Mantra, which is imported from the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. How fortunate I am that I have no attraction for this. Manu wanted to seek shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore when his son Priyavrata took charge of his worldly affairs, Manu was very relieved. That is the system of Vedic civilization. At the end of life, one must free himself from worldly affairs and completely engage in the service of the Lord. The word Surashivara Anumatena is also significant. Manu entrusted the government to his son with the permission of the great Saint Narad. This is particularly mentioned because although Narad wanted Priyavrata to become free from all material affairs, when Priyavrata took charge of the universe by the request of Lord Brahma and Manu, Narada was also very pleased. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Asadi Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare. So I read the verse again. Swami Manu, with the assistance of Lord Brahma, thus fulfilled his desires. With permission of the great sage Narada, he delivered to his son the government responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. He thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So, this is a very nice example of a great Rajarishi like Swami Manu, because in the Vedic age there were great saintly kings, and the saintly kings would rule on behalf of the Lord. They were representatives of Krishna, and they would rule on behalf of the Lord to help the citizens attain spiritual salvation. And they didn't rule for exploiting the citizens or for other reasons, for power and so forth. The only reason was to help the citizens attain perfection. And when they came to a certain point where they wanted to retire, then they would install a suitable king in their place so that the king would govern the citizens in a similar way. So this was the Vedic civilization. But as we can see in the modern age, this is not followed in any way, really. The governmental heads are voted by the people to exploit the people, and they've not really got any real concern for the citizens' spiritual welfare. The main goal is economic development for sense gratification. So this is the goal of the modern civilization. Actually, we call it civilization, but when Gandhi came to England at one time, they asked Gandhi, "What do you think of English civilization?" And he says, "It would be a good idea." So it means that we don't really have any civilization. Is considered, according to the Vedic civilization, it's not really a civilization. It's just people trying to exploit one another. And there's no real brahmanas or real kshatriyas in the world nowadays, because most people are born shudras, and there's no training, no real training to actually develop into brahmanas or kshatriyas. So mainly it's Vaishyas, actually it's mainly Shudras, and there's a few Vaishyas that are in charge, that are voted in by the Shudras. So with such a society, we can't expect too much peace and prosperity, because in the previous ages in Vedic civilization, then the Kshatriyas, or the kings, would rule, and they would govern in such a way that the Brahmanas would be protected, the cows would be protected, and by that the Brahmanas could perform sacrifice for the welfare of the society. But now the cows are being slaughtered. There's no real sacrifices being performed by Brahmanas, and there's no real Brahmanas. So there's no real head to society. And Prabhupada wanted the Hare Krishna movement to create Brahmanas so that there could be a head to society. Because previously the Brahmanas would actually advise the Kshatriya kings on how to rule, and the Kshatriyas would follow the Brahmanas' advice and instructions. And in that way, the Brahmanas would be protected, the Kshatriyas would protect the Vaishyas and Shudras, and society was actually very peaceful and prosperous, because everyone was doing the correct thing according to the Vedas. But there's no real sacrifices being performed now by any Brahmanas. That's why the Sankirtan Yajna is the most important yajna in this age, because it's very simple to perform it. Anybody can perform it, and everybody can perform it. So by this method of sacrifice, then there can be some prosperity in the world. So that is the responsibility of the devotees, to perform this yajna for the benefit of society. So there are many examples in the Bhagavatam of different kings who are ruling, and here we see that Maharaj Priya, it's not that he's just in charge of this planet. He's actually given the post of ruling the whole universe, all the planets of the universe, and that's just like a colossal responsibility. It's like, we get a little bit of responsibility. We think it's a great achievement, and the leaders of the world think that they can lead a country or even this planet. But here we see that it must have been such a great responsibility for Maharaj Priyavata to manage the whole government of the universe. So it's just on a different level, and we can see that they didn't accept this post just for sense enjoyment. It wasn't like something that they thought they could get in power and exploit everyone. But their whole mood was to maintain and protect the kingdom and the welfare of the citizens. So they're very exemplary, responsible monarchs. And we can see an example of Maharaj Dasarath in the Ramayana, that Maharaj Dasarath was wanting to retire, and he wanted to install his son Lord Ram in his place, so that he could be a good ruler, and then he could go and retire. Similarly, when the Pandavas, Maharaj Yudhisthira, wanted to retire, then they installed Maharaj Parikshit as the king, so that they could actually, they knew that there would be a good king in their place, and they could retire in peace. And also, there's so many other examples throughout the Bhagavatam, and this was the system, that the kings would retire and leave a good monarch in their place to rule the citizens. And so you can see in the Mahabharata that Maharaj Yudhisthira, although he was accepted by all the citizens as an ideal king, Duryodhana wanted to take over because he was so envious. And although Duryodhana was materially a good king, he could rule materially really well, he didn't have any spiritual vision. So in one sense, he wasn't really a representative of the Lord. So, and that's why Krishna wanted Maharaj Yudhisthira to be installed as a king, because Maharaj Yudhishthira accepted the supreme authority of the Lord, and he would rule according to the scriptures and the Brahmanas. So we may have some material capability, but it doesn't really mean that we're necessarily the right person to be in a post of leadership. So the real responsibility was in the kings, and their example had to be exemplary. They had to rule in such a way as to satisfy all the citizens and to protect them. That was their first duty. And protection doesn't just mean physical protection, but actually protection from sinful activity, performing sinful activity, protection from material laws, material nature. So that's why there was Varnashram. The Varnashram system was established so that everyone could be satisfied in their ashram and occupation, so that they could actually progress in spiritual life. And the ultimate goal was self-realization. So here, Swami Vimana is really happy now that he's given the post to Priyavrata, and now he can retire in peace. And it says here, it's quite interesting, it says that he thus achieve relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So it's like he got relief from it, but he gave it to Maharaj Priyavrata to take over this dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So it's not considered very good for self-realization, all this worldly responsibility. It's actually a dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So Swami Vimana was actually happy to get free from this, and gave it all to Maharaj Priyavrata to take over. And here, material affairs have been compared to an ocean of poison, and Narottam Das Thakur sings this also in his songs. Samsara Vishanami is the fire of material existence, and the only relief, as here it says, the only remedy is Harinam Sankirtan, and the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is imported from the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. So this is the real remedy, especially in this age of Kali. Harinam Sankirtan is actually the only remedy to get us free from the poisonous ocean of material desires. And this is actually the greatest benediction for this day and age. All the other types of religious activities and performances, they're like very, very insignificant compared to the effects of Harinam Sankirtan. This is the Mahayagya, the great yagya of this age. And we can see how Srila Prabhupada, he basically came to the West with Harinam, basically that's what his mood was, that the holy name would do everything, and it did. He gave us the holy name, and it spread, and it's changed everyone's life. The devotees have, been freed from the cycle of birth and death by the Sankirtan movement. So it's such an important yagya in this age, but nothing can compare to it. And so whether we are whatever varna or ashram we're in, the the main remedy, the main purpose of our devotional service is to be able to chant purely. That is the ultimate perfection for life, that be able to come to the point of chanting Shuddhanam, and that way we become free from this material existence and develop pure love for Krishna. So this is the way we can satisfy the Lord in this day and age. And we get the highest benediction, the highest benefit, and it's very simple to perform. It's not a great austerity. Like in previous ages, people had to perform so much austerity. But it's a very joyful, it's joyfully performed. Everyone likes to dance and sing and kirtan. And Narottam Das Thakur says it's simply joyful. This Lochan Das Thakur says in the song that they've introduced a system which is simply joyful. So this will attract the living beings of this day and age. The people are suffering so much, they want to try to get some relief. And this is definitely going to give relief from material existence, material suffering. So is there any questions or comments?
I have a more practical question. It's not about the lecture, it's about the prasadam. And in the evening we have prasadam at 7 o'clock, and I would like to know why is it so late?
Well, because it's not part of Bhagavatam lecture, then we can answer that another time later after class.
Yeah.
It's not really part of Bhagavatam. Thank you. Okay, anything else from anybody? Yes, please.
Yeah, so like, what does maintaining and protecting all the planets like entail? I've never really heard that. I never really heard this before. It hasn't stuck out because I know that Mahavishnu obviously maintains all the universes and everything. Is it like an empowered post, like a demigod kind of, almost like a special power to be able to do that? Or?
Well, it's not so much, it's maintaining like some order, like, some sort of system. It's not so much maintaining like the planets, like, you know what I mean?
Not a mystical thing.
Yeah, it's more like maintaining some universal order.
Like the Varnashram.
Yes, something similar to that.
Yeah.
To make sure that everyone's doing their duty.
Yes.
So, it's more in that kind of sense that. Okay. So, thank you very much for attending the class. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Shishi Prabhupada Shishi ki jai.
Thanks to the country.
Joe?